We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast, brought to you by Andrew Womack Ministries.
Hi, welcome to the Truth and Liberty livecast. This is Richard Harris, and I'm really excited to have tonight as our special guest, John Guondolo. And John is a former FBI agent, Marine Corps officer, and an expert, I would say, on Islamic terrorism. So I'm really excited to have you tonight, John.
Thanks for having me here, Richard.
Yeah, awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so it's going to be a great night tonight. And before we get into our program, I want to share some information with you if I could. First, there's some awesome stuff going on. There's always great things happening here at Andrew Womack Ministries, and a couple of events that we have coming up I want you to know about. The next one is called the Kingdom Business Summit, and it's June 12th to the 14th. And we're going to have a number of great business leaders at this event talking about the principles for success in business and how to make an impact for the kingdom of God through your business, and a lot of great subjects like that. You can check out more information on businesssummit2019.com. So we hope you'll do that. The Summer Family Bible Conference is the first week of July, July 1st through the 5th. We always schedule that over the 4th of July, and it is always a great event. You can bring your family and kids, and they're guaranteed to have a great time. And so you can check that out as well on awmi.net/events. There's going to be a number of great speakers, not just Andrew, but Billy Epperhard and Daniel Amstutz. Congressman Bob McEwen's going to be there. Pastor Mark Cowart. It's an event you won't want to miss. So check out the Summer Family Bible Conference. I want to talk about our giveaway. Every week here on the Truth and Liberty livecast, we give away a free product. For those of you who register online on our website, you're eligible for a free product giveaway. And last week, we gave away Andrew's book, A Better Way to Pray, and the winner was David Taff. Congratulations, David. You should be getting an email about that shortly. So happy for you on that. And we've got, John's got a book here. He brought it with him. It's called Raising a Jihadi Generation, Understanding the Muslim Brotherhood Movement in America by John Guondolo. John, what's this book about?
It's all about the Islamic network in the United States and how they actually are able to achieve what they're trying to achieve, what we're going to talk about here tonight.
Excellent. So sign up register on our website, truthandliberty.net, and you'll be eligible to receive the giveaways here on Truth and Liberty. So, and this is an interactive process, and we really like to receive questions from our audience and answer those questions. And if you'd like to participate tonight, you can do that on our website in the live chat feature. You can post your questions or comments. And then also, if you're watching on Facebook tonight, you can post your comments there on the comment section, and we'll review those and try to get to your questions tonight. So we're looking forward to that. And let me just tell you folks, the Truth and Liberty Coalition is supported by your generosity and donations, and we are so thankful for that. It enables us to fulfill our mission here at the Truth and Liberty Coalition. So if you'd like to support us, you can do that by texting GIVE, G-I-V-E, to 719-301-2552, or you can go on our website and click on the donate button there on truthandliberty.net. So thank you so much for that. And if you need prayer tonight, we have prayer ministers standing by to help you with that. And you can call 719-635-1111. And before we get started here, I want to give John a proper introduction. Before we do that, I do want to say a few words about our website. So if you haven't checked out the Truth and Liberty website, you really need to do that. We've got some awesome resources on there. We have a news feed, so you can catch all of our favorite news sources on there, and it's updated continuously. You don't need to go to Fox News or anywhere else. Just go to truthandliberty.net. But also, we have a number of resources there, from finding your congressman, finding your senator, registering to vote, and a whole lot of other things. The latest resource we added was a link to the Mueller report. So that was issued last week, and we have it in its entirety on our website. Just go to that link and check it, and I'm sure you all will read that, all 650 pages or whatever that is. But we have a lot of great resources on there, so we hope you'll check that out. So thanks everybody for joining us, and I just want to get into the program here. John, it's so good to have you with us. John teaches in the Practical Government School here at Charis Bible College, along with a lot of other great instructors, but you teach all over the place. You've got a ministry. It's called Understanding the Threat. You want to share a little bit with us about what that is?
You know, it's interesting because Understanding the Threat is, first of all, is a corporation registered in Texas, but we consider it, the team, more of a ministry because of the fact that we, the team, as we were talking about before the show, every morning during the work week, the team gets together and we pray. And we are trying to do what we believe we're called to do. And really, if we boiled it down into one thing, it's just simply speaking truth boldly in love about real threats to the community, to the states, to the nation, to the civilized world.
Excellent. And I think we've got your website available for people, but you might as well go ahead and tell us, what is that? It's understandingthethreat.com. All one word there, so check that out. Well, John, let's talk a little bit about your background. I'd like for our viewers to get to know you a little bit. For starters, you're a Naval Academy graduate. When did you get out of the academy?
1989.
1989.
The last great year.
And you didn't go serve on a ship somewhere. You went into the Marine Corps.
Yes.
Served in both of the Gulf Wars, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And had a distinguished military career, a little bit, from 91 to 96, and then after that you went into the FBI, is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Joined the FBI in 1996 and worked in the criminal division for a little over 4 years, doing narcotics work and some other things. And then after 9/11, got brought into the counterterrorism division.
And how did your experience in the FBI kind of train you or qualify you to become such an expert on Muslim terrorism? That's
a good question, and I appreciate the question because it gives me the opportunity to kind of walk this out a little bit. After 9/11, we obviously were working that case and a lot of cases revolving around individuals that were either peripherally or directly involved. And there were several cases that I was the case agent or co-case agent on with another agent, which directly led me to understanding the threat of a massive network in the United States. So let me break it down this way. There were a couple cases. One was through an Army chaplain who was committing espionage with linguists, uniformed and civilian linguists, working for the Department of Defense. And he got arrested, but they didn't really have their case together, and the case fell apart on the military side. But what we did was we were looking at this from a bigger perspective, so we opened up what the FBI calls a major case. And through looking at that, and through looking at who certifies Muslim chaplains in the military and in the government, and I found out that two certifying agencies are Muslim Brotherhood front groups, certifying chaplains for the U.S. military. Well, as I dug into that, I looked at groups related to them, which are prominent Muslim groups in America: the Islamic Society of North America, the Muslim Student Association, the Muslim American Society, the Islamic Circle of North America. These are very prominent groups: Muslim Public Affairs Council, Council on American Islamic Relations. And what we saw was a lot of these terrorism cases were linked to these organizations. And so I, like most people today, went through a process of going, this can't be right. Like, it can't be this bad. And in fact, it's worse. It's actually worse. And so that process of coming to understand that, and the evidence that actually demonstrates that the prominent Islamic groups in America are literally supporting the jihad here against the U.S. government and against the United States. That's kind of what's captured in this book, Raising a Jihadi Generation. That's why I titled it that, because that comes from a quote from an Islamic leader talking about we need to raise a generation of jihadis in America.
Well, I think we probably have some viewers out there right now who may not even understand what is jihad. What is this that we're talking about here? I mean, they hear about Muslim terrorists, but I think the average person, if all they do is watch the mainstream news, they think that this just as extremists who have, if you will, maybe perverted an otherwise legitimate religion. What is Islamic Jihad?
Okay, so if we're going to define Islamic Jihad, we have to start with what is Islam.
Okay.
And so when we teach and when we talk about, when understanding the threat, when I teach what I'm about to say, I'm talking using language that they teach their children and they teach scholars at the highest schools of Islamic jurisprudence. I don't use books by non-Muslim authorities unless it's to make a point about a strategy or something that they're already referencing. But if you stick to Islamic doctrine, what they teach, Islam defines itself as a complete way of life, social, cultural, military, political, and religious, all governed by Sharia. Sharia is Allah's divine law, according to Islam. And that comes from the Quran and the example of their perfect man, Muhammad. And so the Sharia is what is given to mankind, all mankind, to follow. And every human is supposed to follow the Sharia.
So I want to interrupt you for just a second here, because I think you said a lot of stuff in there that's really key to understanding. And one of them was, you said that Islam is taught as a complete way of life, not just religious, but it's civic, it's government, it's family, it's business, it's everything. Is that right?
That's correct.
So if we think of Islam as just another religion, are we leaving out a major, or actually more than one major aspect of what Islam actually is?
Yes.
It's a political philosophy, not just a religion.
It's a totalitarian ideology governed by a foreign law that's hostile to the civilized world, to be clear.
Wow.
So when you look at, for example, if we just start with Muhammad, without getting into the intricacies of Islamic jurisprudence, Muhammad's the perfect example. Well, Muhammad condoned the killing of people that mocked him. Muhammad married a 6-year-old and consummated the relationship when she was 9. Muhammad participated in beheading 900 Jews after the Battle of the Trench. Muhammad condoned and allowed for the taking of sex slaves. Muhammad said he was commanded to fight the unbelievers until they testified there's no God but Allah. And then his authoritative biography that is used in mosque bookstores and in Islamic schools across the United States is littered with battles and raids that he participated in.
And what's that biography called? The Sirah?
The Sirat Rasulullah. The Sirah is the biography of the messenger of Allah, Muhammad.
Okay. So, and so you said he's the perfect example. In other words, Islam teaches that Muhammad was the perfect model of behavior.
That's right.
Right. And so if you do what Muhammad did, then you're a good Muslim.
That's correct.
All right.
And so those are things that he did.
Yeah.
He was, and if you understand that, all this nonsense that people talk about it's extreme. If it's extreme, then the question has to be asked, why is it that the most widely used textbook for 12-year-olds in U.S. Islamic schools says on page 2, and I quote, Islam is not a religion, however, but a complete way of life.
Wow.
And it also says in that book that if somebody dies in jihad, they automatically go to paradise. And it also says in that book that the duty of the Muslim citizen is to be loyal to the Islamic State, not to the U.S. Constitution, not to the United States of America. That's taught in U.S. schools to 11 and 12-year-olds.
In U.S. public schools, or
Well, actually, in some U.S. public schools, but mostly I'm talking about Islamic schools in the United States. And the question has to be asked, if it is, and by the way it is, a capital crime for a Muslim to teach another Muslim something about Islam that's not true, and they're teaching this to their 12-year-olds, which, by the way, is exactly the opposite of what Islamic leaders are telling our leaders.
Now, you're going to have to unpack that one.
So Muslims are teaching 12-year-old Muslim children, Islam is not a religion, but a complete way of life governed by Sharia.
Okay.
Yet Islamic leaders demand from the American government religious accommodations
Right.
up and down.
Yeah, so they teach their own children Islam is not a mere religion. Islam is a complete way of life. And yet they turn around and say, protect us, U.S. Constitution, because we are a religion.
Correct.
All right, I got it.
And nobody's asked the question, why these two things are exactly opposite. Why do you teach your children one thing, but you tell us another?
Yeah.
And why is it that 100% of all Islamic doctrine requires warfare against the non-Muslim community until Islam rules the world? And yet, that's exactly the opposite what they've been telling us. And obviously they're good at it because our Department of Defense and our Congress and our national security apparatus has catastrophically failed us because they bought into that lie.
Well, I want to talk about, the current state of affairs and, whether we're doing what we need to do to protect this country and so forth. But let's go back to this idea of Sharia for a second. Can we do that?
Yes.
Now, a lot of times you hear people say Sharia law. I think that might be actually redundant, right?
It is.
What is Sharia?
So Sharia is Allah's divine law, and it comes from the Quran and the Sunnah, the example of the Prophet Muhammad. And a couple things the audience needs to understand is the Quran can only be understood if you understand that what comes chronologically last overrules what comes before it. That's the short version of explaining that.
They call it the doctrine of abrogation.
Correct.
Yeah.
And another key to understanding that is when...
Is that another way of saying, don't pay attention to what I said earlier, just listen to what I'm saying now?
Well, it's the idea that you bring a society along progressively.
Yeah.
So over the 22 and a half years that Muhammad shared his revelations from their God, Allah, it went from 13 or 12 and a half years in Mecca where there was no jihad because there were only, for most of the time, there were between 6 and 20 of them. And then after 12 and a half years, depending on the source, somewhere between 100 and 200 people were converted to Islam. That's not a lot.
Right.
Well, then he goes on hijrah, or he goes from Mecca to Medina, on the journey from Mecca to Medina. And by the way, that's when the Islamic calendar starts, and that's when we get our first jihad. Right away, defensive jihad, limited, although defensive jihad as they define it, not as we define it. Then limited offensive jihad, and then the final command for jihad, war against the non-Muslims, as a permanent obligation against the entire Muslim community until the entire world is under Sharia, Allah's divine law. Because why wouldn't you do that? So Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians are given an opportunity to convert, to submit to Islamic law and pay the non-Muslim poll tax or be killed. Pagans who didn't have a holy book at the time of the Prophet have that one choice, right? Convert or be killed. That's it.
Okay, so
that's Islam.
So Sharia is Muslim law that the Muslim is commanded to spread throughout the world by force.
By all means possible.
By all means possible.
And jihad, which you asked initially, is total war.
Okay.
So it's not just artillery, airplanes, rifles. It's total war.
Right.
It's propaganda. It's influence operations. It's espionage. It's counterintelligence. It's nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. It's conventional warfare on the battlefield. It's all those things. And so children are taught, we have the training guides that, the Muslim American Society and the Islamic Circle of North America use that says, even if you can't do that, the Muslim is required to hate the un-Islamic government in their hearts, if that's all they can do, under the circumstances they're in.
So let me ask you this, based on everything you've studied and learned, is it possible does a Muslim believe that the U.S. Constitution is legitimate law compared to Sharia?
A Sharia adherent Muslim, a Muslim who believes in Allah's divine law, which under penalty of death they're commanded to believe. But obviously there are Muslims who do not. We can talk about that if you would like. But no, a Muslim who is Sharia adherent and doing the things that Islam commands, sees the Constitution and must see the Constitution as man-made law. And that has to be overthrown and destroyed.
Wow. Well, we could ask the follow-up question. Time's already clicking by so fast. There's so much to say on the subject, but how does a Sharia-observant Muslim raise their hand and swear to uphold the U.S. Constitution?
They do not.
When they get sworn into office?
They cannot.
So when they appear to do that, what's going on?
That's treason.
Are they just lying?
Yes.
And under Sharia, is that okay to lie?
Yes. As a matter of fact, Islamic law says, the actual title in one of the books called the Umdat al-Salik, Reliance of the Traveler, which has the approval of Al-Azhar, and I just say that because that's the highest authority in Sunni Islamic law, the oldest school of Islamic jurisprudence on the planet. They have their imprimatur in there saying this is good law. But the Muslim Brotherhood also, and major Muslim organizations, promote this book. It's in bookstores, in every mosque bookstore we've ever been in across the country. And it says that it is permissible to lie if the goal is permissible for Muslims, and obligatory to lie if the goal is obligatory. Well, expanding Islam is obligatory.
Well, that's incredible. So let's talk a little bit, if we can, more. I want people to know what you do, a little bit more detail. What is understanding the threat? What do you guys do? I think you do some training, you do some education. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
So to sum it up, we are the only organization in America that is giving citizens, police, local and state officials tools to identify primarily the Islamic network in their community, but also Marxist networks, and giving them tools for strategies, for police, investigative strategies, for citizens, actions that they can take, and for state leaders, strategies to dismantle the networks. We're the only ones doing that. So there are people out there doing some education. Most of them are all friends and colleagues. There are some people teaching other things about this, but we're the only ones that are putting the rubber on the road and giving people the tools to actually take action, because clearly the federal government is just completely failed.
Well, let's talk about the current state of affairs. But I want people to know: are you supported by donations?
So, understanding the threat is a business, but allies created an organization called Americans for America. And if you go to the website, our website, Understanding the Threat, and click the donate button, that would be, number one, greatly appreciated, because we are attacked on all sides by the Marxists and the jihadis. But yes, that nonprofit exists to support our work, to support police when we train them, because a lot of these departments can't afford to send their folks to some of these trainings, and to support our travel and the work we do. Because as of now, we've relied, I'd say, a significant portion on the donations. We still obviously get paid and we go teach at police units and other things, but it was becoming very difficult. It was almost impossible during the Obama administration. It's loosened up a little and things are changing, but still we're losing. We're woefully behind. And I want to just, if I could make this one point.
Sure.
In 2014, we were sharing before the program, 75 organizations, Marxists and jihadis, petitioned the president's counterterrorism, National Security Advisor for Counterterrorism, Lisa Monaco, and said, we need to shut Understanding the Threat and John Guondolo down. And we've written about this. And this was in August of 2014. And the reason that 75 Marxist and jihadi organizations would try to shut me and my organization down is because we're putting rounds on target, proverbially speaking.
Yeah.
They know that we are nailing them, that we're speaking truth. And we have a standing offer, by the way, that if anybody can demonstrate that what we say about the Muslim Brotherhood network, the Jihadi network, which is the Iranian network, the Deobandi network here in the United States, or about Sharia, or about what Sharia is and what it says, we will stop teaching it, we'll remove it from our materials, and we will give the person who brings it to our attention $1,000 cash. Now, in the over 3 years we've been doing this, and by the way, I've sent emails to leaders of Hamas in the United States, Muslim Brotherhood organizations, CARE, Ibrahim Hooper, and Nihad Awad, in case you guys are watching, and said, if you can demonstrate, we'll give you the money. And of course, they can't, because what we're saying is true, and they know it's true. And that's why they try to shut us down.
So you've mentioned a couple times so far that the state of affairs where we find ourselves, as a country right now, is that we're really not properly prepared to fight this war on terror.
Right.
9/11 was almost 20 years ago now. It's amazing. And, would you say that today, almost 20 years later, we are better prepared than then, or not as prepared as we were at that time?
Significantly worse.
We're actually worse 19 years later than we were even in 2001.
Right.
What's your, what's your assessment of that? Why are you saying that?
A few data points. So when I got recruited out of the FBI in the end of 2008 to go in the Department of Defense, I went in and I briefed 3- and 4-star generals, chairmen of committees like Homeland Security, Intelligence Committee, Judiciary Committee, numerous members of Congress, former FBI, CIA, and DI directors, and I never briefed anybody that understood what myself and my colleague were talking about. They had no idea about how Sharia as a doctrine was driving the enemy's war effort. They had no idea about the network in the United States. Now, I was a captain in the U.S. Marines. That's not a high rank, although I'm honored to have served. And I was, for most of my career, minus 90 days at FBI headquarters as a supervisor, I was an investigator. I was a special agent on the ground working cases. And so briefing men at this level, men and women at that level, and them not knowing it until we briefed them, blew me away. And so that's data point probably 1 through 10. Now when we go out and we brief police, even if there are FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force agents in the room, at the end of our 3-day law enforcement, National Guard, first responder program that we do, 100% of them will say, number one, we've never heard this information, and number two, we believe it's critical for protecting our community. That is the key, because the enemy, the way the enemy wants to win this war is not primarily through the violence. It's by shutting down people like me and our organization so that the people who do this work never get the tools they need to actually put their heel on these enemies and crush them like they need to be crushed.
How do they propose to shut you down?
Well, since we're not teaching at the federal government level right now, I'd say they have certainly pushed us out of all federal engagement. I mean, that's been since 2011 and 12 when Mr. Obama shut down the training, a lot of which I had created inside the government and people that I'd worked with, both at the Joint Forces Staff College, that was shut down and it was national news, stuff inside the FBI, which was the lead. Anything that referred to Islam, Jihad, Sharia was all removed.
Wow.
So when you take an enemy that says we are Muslims waging jihad to establish an Islamic state under Sharia, and now the government tells you you can't use those words to identify the enemy, and we're shutting all training related to that down.
How do you fight a war when you don't even know who your enemy is?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And there we have it, and that's how they intend to win the war.
So I don't know what you would call it. To put it mildly, would be a severe form of political correctness was imposed by the Obama administration on the federal government, right?
Yes.
And I know that you probably think that's mild.
It's very mild.
Yeah. So you're saying that President Obama and his administration basically purged the law enforcement community at a federal level from the information that they needed in order to effectively fight terrorism in the United States.
Correct.
Is that true also for the intelligence communities?
Oh yeah, across the board.
Across the board.
If I brought in 50 random people from, 6 different agencies and put them in a room, I could give them a 1-page test that none of them would pass. And it's basic information on this threat. And here's the point. We're good at finding people that want to do violence. But if you look at how they intend, and I'm just talking about the Islamic movement right now, not the Marxists. If you look at how they're doing it, they want us to focus 100% of our attention on the violence. Then they show up wearing suits, as they did prior to 9/11, by the way, but it's got significantly worse since 9/11, to say, we will help you. So when we can demonstrate that all of the Islamic advisors at the federal level are batting for the other team, to be clear, enemies of the United States.
Well, let's ask this question. If they're not, if they're Muslims, but they're not advocating violence or not committing violence, then how is it that that is a threat to the United States?
Because this is much more a espionage and counterintelligence operation. This is, from a military standpoint, information warfare. And what they're doing is they are driving all the powers of the U.S. government in a direction that has nothing to do with the enemy. Countering violent extremism, for instance, we've built an entire section in DHS. We have followed it. So I ask people, and I'll ask, how many people have you seen on TV saying, I'm a violent extremist fighting to advance violent extremism? Right? No, none.
Not too often, right.
So as long as all forces of national power in the CIA, FBI, DHS, NSA are focused on violent extremists, you're focused on a pseudo-reality. You're focused on something that does not exist. What does exist is Islam and jihad and jihadists. What does exist are Marxists and a Marxist organized movement that has a long-term plan that it has enacted and is actually pulling down the structures of our system. So that's the purpose.
So what is this relationship between Marxists, or basically communists, and Muslims?
The relationship is that they are working together with one overt cause, and that is, you can go to the Comintern or Communist Party USA or RevCom or Freedom Road Socialist Organization and read their websites. They want to bring down the United States government.
Name some of those organizations again. What?
So the Revolutionary Communist Party, but the biggest ones are the Democratic Socialists, the Communist Party USA, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Comintern, right, the International Communist Party. These are real organizations with real doctrine, and we can map it out to things going on today. Right.
So does it go back to the old saying that the enemy of my enemy is my friend?
I think it's yes, a little bit, but I want to draw some clear distinctions. What the Marxist movement, what their doctrine, they're willing to work with anybody that seeks to overthrow, destroy the American culture. The Marxists said our primary objective is to destroy Christianity in America, because they know if we, for instance, in the 1930s, have an overt operation to put homosexuals, well over 1,000, into Catholic seminaries, and we go after the family unit, and we take the work to take the Bible out of U.S. public schools, and we promote the homosexual agenda, and we promote these things that will destroy Christianity in the United States and destroy the family unit. Well, they'll do all those things, and they did, and they have, and we've got all that ratcheted back 70, 80 years. The Islamic doctrine says you can work with these nationalists and other groups so long as you do not violate Sharia. We've got that in Muslim Brotherhood doctrine. You can find it on understandingthethreat.com under the resources. So what they have in common, the overthrow of an un-Islamic government, the overthrow of a non-Marxist government, hostile government. They're both going to take it down.
Well, so we want to take some questions here before we go a lot further, but I do want to talk about some of the stuff that's in the news lately. So there was an attack, as you know, in Sri Lanka, where a number of Christian churches were bombed on Easter. And I understand that even today or yesterday there was some renewed violence there. What do you know about that situation?
Well, it happened on Easter. A very coordinated attack against hotels and Christian churches in Sri Lanka. And we know that that's lawful in Islam, what they did. We know that there are some key Islamic imams involved. And you have to ask yourself, why would an imam be involved in a terrorist plot? Well, I would just remind your viewers that Omar Abdel Rahman, the blind sheikh responsible for the first World Trade Center bombing and numerous terrorist plots, was literally one of 2 or 3 of the most revered Islamic scholars on the planet. And the guy who founded Al-Qaeda with Osama bin Laden, Abdullah Azzam, was a teacher who taught at Al-Azhar, which puts him in the cream of the crop of Islamic scholars. So how are these Islamic scholars getting their version of Islam wrong, just like these people in Sri Lanka? They're not.
So we had an interesting thing come up, and I commented on this in the Facebook Live thing I did earlier promoting our live cast tonight. And some of you may have seen this in the headlines. But within the day after the Sri Lankan bombings, former President Obama and Hillary Clinton, and then several other prominent Democrats came out with statements. Some of them were on Twitter or whatever. But it was remarkable how they were using similar terminology. And the one that kind of caught Christians' ire was the phrase Easter worshipers.
Right.
But it struck me that there's other problems with these statements too, which is they're not referring to terrorism, much less Islamic terrorism. And so they're not calling Christians Christians, not calling Muslim terrorists terrorists. And then they also tried to treat it as just, some random act of violence against people trying to pursue peace or whatever. Can you break this down for us? What's really going on here in the response of the Democratic leadership to that attack?
First of all, so we're clear. From our perspective, understanding the threat, the national Democrat leadership, the Democrat Party at the national level, is the Marxist Party in the United States. That's
a big statement, right?
Clear as we can be. If you look at their policies, you look at their platform, it is exact, and you look at what comes out of the mouths of their leaders. I said earlier, this is information warfare. It's not accidental that all these people within, 10, 15 minutes put out all these things, and you see the same verbiage. That's a directed information campaign. Because if it's not Islam, what is it? We have to find the answer somewhere else. Maybe it's there aren't enough McDonald's in Yemen. They're not well educated enough. It's economic depravity. It's U.S. foreign policy. It's Israel's fault. It's some other fault. No. They do it because it's a command from Allah to wage jihad, and they're required to do it when they have the material ability and the resources to do so, period. And so in periods of history when they didn't. When the West had the boot on the neck of the Islamic community, they didn't wage jihad. Right. But when they didn't, they did. The Islamic community did. So this is an information battle space. This is an information war, so this is where the war is fought primarily.
Well, we could talk for, I think, 3 hours about this, John. We just don't have enough time to go into everything. I just want to remind people, you can get more information on John's website, understandingofthethreat.com. Make sure you register on truthandliberty.net, be eligible to receive the free product, Raising a Jihadi Generation. And we have a lot of questions coming in here, and I think we ought to take a little bit of time to respond to these. We've got people watching from all over the United States and actually overseas, including South Africa, Hong Kong, and most of the states in the U.S. are listed here. But here's a question. from Cowboy Tom on chat. Could John please tell us, by his estimate, how many of our major cities have areas that are considered unsafe due to radical Islamic presence within, as well as the number of rural areas with training camps for violent jihad?
Okay, take a long answer. I'm going to give you the short answer. First of all, I don't know what you mean when you say radical. What happened in Sri Lanka, what happened on 9/11 is not radical. It's what besides modern technology, it's what the armies of the perfect example, Muhammad, did. So not radical, it's just Islam. And our fear of speaking truth into this across the United States at all levels is the reason we're where we are. Well, first of all, there are major areas that you're probably well aware of. Dearborn and Detroit area of Michigan, significant jihadi presence there. And there are certainly, anywhere you have a significant Islamic community, you have Sharia is the law there. And I can tell you that from interviewing Muslims in communities in Falls Church around the Dar al-Hijra Mosque, which is a Hamas Muslim Brotherhood mosque that the executive assistant director of the FBI Paul Abet was at not too long ago, hugging the leadership there. So that if you want to talk about catastrophic failure and treason, that's a place to begin, but I digress. So Minneapolis has a significant, dangerous jihadi population there. I mean, upwards of 60 to 80,000 Somalis. We have numerous. That's the #1 spot in the country in Ilhan Omar's district, by the way, of suicide bombers. They're really martyrs going overseas to fight in the jihad, more in her district than anywhere else in the country. But you've also got places like Nashville, Tennessee, where you have a very strong presence. Charlotte, North Carolina, which has a moderate presence, but you've got areas of New York and Brooklyn, very strong jihadi presence, strong Hamas presence in Tampa, Florida. And then to the end of his question, you've probably got about 20-some active jihadi camps, but those are the ones he's probably asking about are Muslims of America, the Jamaat al-Fukra camps. But there are also other Muslim Brotherhood camps in the United States, and those are active.
I don't know how the average person feels, listening to you, but my reaction is, what? How can we have actual terrorist training camps in the United States that are being allowed to operate? How is that even possible?
Well, when you have an FBI and a DHS that do not understand the threat, that are focused on things that don't have to do. I have had FBI agents look me in the eye and say, white racists are the biggest threat we face in America.
Right, the Janet Reno thing.
I'm like, you are a lunatic.
So,
but that's all. If you've been in the FBI since this, let's say 2009, 10 years, that's all you've been taught.
Mm-hmm. Well, so here's another question. Michael on chat says, I have many friends of the Islamic faith that tell me they are for peace only. I'm not totally naive, but from history, which shows some Muslims are not totally dedicated to killing everyone, what can we do to help stop this movement in America?
Okay, great question. Mike?
Yeah, Michael. Mm-hmm.
Michael, thank you for the question. Let me say this, and I'm going to talk right to Michael. When I was an FBI agent, I worked with people that were Muslim, and a couple of them went overseas, sometimes with me, sometimes without me, and did incredibly dangerous things and identified al-Qaeda safe houses, weapons caches, and we were able to give it to military and non-military forces that took action overseas. So I can attest that there are Muslims in the community who want to help. A couple problems. One, a number of Muslims that I tried to work with said, no way in you-know-what am I going to help you because your FBI leadership is working with Muslim Brotherhood leadership. So we know who they are. Why would we work with you knowing if our name goes into your system, they're going to find out about it, the Muslim Brotherhood. And they're right. We have linguists at the Washington field office batting for the other team. And that's where it is. So yes, there are Muslims who do not want to live under Sharia because it's a barbaric system. That the Hudud laws that allow for beheading, crucifixion. That all comes out of the Quran. Amputation, whipping, banishment, all that stuff comes right out of the Quran. Those are hudud laws. Those are lawful in Islam. It's barbaric. So you've got some human beings that don't want to live under that. They see it for what it is. The problem is, in the Muslim community, to turn away from that puts you at risk of death. And therein lies the problem.
Yeah, so it kind of raises a bigger question, I think. How do we as a country, how do you draw the line between a peaceful Muslim and a jihadi? How do we know the difference, number one? Number two, how do you craft any kind of a sane policy that keeps jihadis out of the country while allowing quote-unquote peaceful Muslims into the country?
At the risk of going too far, because the problem we normally have is when you talk about solutions to an audience that doesn't fully understand the problem, the solutions may sound a bit harsh, but I will tell you, we're on the precipice of losing the war. So let me say this. Sharia is the line you draw, and no public display of Sharia adherence should be allowed. Do what Kemal Ataturk did in Turkey. No call to prayer out loud, no minarets. Certainly, since mosques are what Muhammad said they are, and they're the place from which they launched the jihad, they're not Muslim churches. No wearing burqas, no wearing the hijab. Do what Kemal Ataturk did. Outlaw all of that, because Sharia in and of itself is a system that is seditious, and if you're in public office like Ilhan Omar, you are committing treason for what she's doing. She's treasonous. Yes, read my lips, treason, and should be charged for it.
Well, let's be specific. What has she done that's treasonous that you know of?
Well, let's look at who she's working with. She is advancing the cause of Muslim Brotherhood organizations and Hamas organizations.
Both of which are recognized terrorist organizations.
Not in the United States. Hamas is, the Muslim Brotherhood is not.
Okay.
The Muslim Brotherhood is recognized overseas in some countries as a terrorist entity, and we have bills sitting in the Senate and the House of Representatives to designate them, and the President said he would, but he hasn't, to the great detriment of the United States. But she has spoken at events, to advance CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, which is a Hamas entity. Now, lawyers will say, well, CARE is not designated, but CARE operates as an entity of Hamas in the United States. That's a fact. The evidence is on the table. The fact that the FBI has failed to do their due diligence and shut them down is a different story. To go a little deeper, without spending too much more time, she met with Erdogan, we now know, as a state legislator in 2017. Yeah. He is most likely going to be the next caliph. They are already calling him sultan. And I would say in the next, could be as early as 3 months, but certainly I would say 18 months, maybe a little outside of that, they're going to declare the real caliphate. And they're going to declare a caliph. And when that happens, you're going to see the kind of activity in Europe that we saw in 1683 and,
You're saying you expect there to be a declaration from Turkey that they are a caliphate?
The seat of the caliphate will be Turkey. Erdogan will likely be the caliph. They're already calling him sultan. And the president of the worldwide ummah, the global Muslim community. So what is she doing? She's conspiring with him and with these Hamas leaders like Nihad Awad, the leader of Hamas in the United States, in the efforts here in the United States. So the question is, what are we going to do about that?
Yeah, what are we going to do about it? Well, here's another question. We have people asking, what can my husband and I do as private citizens to help in this effort?
Okay, so a number of things. One, I would say, and we say it this way, you got to learn the material. So we have a lot of resources on our website to actually teach you. There are other, you probably won't hear many people do this, but Dr. Bill Warner, politicalislam.com, great resource. But I would say understandthethreat.com, we have websites that we recommend. because they're too numerous to list in the time we have, books and videos. But if you go to our resources, we've got this book, Raising a Jihadi Generation. I just released a new book, Islam's Deception, The Truth About Sharia. It's on Amazon, it's on our website. You can get it Kindle, whatever. We've got...
Say that name again so people can catch it.
Islam's Deception, The Truth About Sharia.
Okay.
And we've got 5 DVDs. One is a 2-DVD, 5.5-hour program on Sharia. The other, the last one, which is the one I think is the best, is Who Are We? Which is what are we actually fighting for? What is it? What is the American Republic all about? I think we have programs, 2-day programs for citizens. We have evening programs or day programs for churches. We have 3-day law enforcement programs. We are getting ready to publish a book called The Battle Plan to give you just a list of things. But the key thing you can do is learn what the threat is and ask your local pastor, police, school board, city council members, are you aware of this threat? That's a good start.
Yeah. And then maybe tell them about understanding the threat and see if they can invite John and his team to come and teach local law enforcement about this subject. But I'd like to ask you about President Trump and his administration, and I think everybody is happy at the progress that the American military's made against ISIS, and it's at least in terms of its geographical control there in the Middle East. But how do you see the situation? Have we made progress there, and would you give the president any high marks? And where are we? How good a job has Donald Trump done? Right.
This is the president who said on CNN, I think, Islam hates us, and we need to find out why. Exactly. Why? Why do they do what they do? Because Allah's divine law tells them to do it. It's really not much more complicated than that. And the fact that some Muslims don't do it doesn't change what it is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I would give him pretty good marks on trying to obliterate ISIS. The problem is ISIS is not the problem. Al-Qaeda is not the problem. Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Abu Sayyaf, Hamas, Hezbollah are all problems, not the problem. The violent edge of what they're doing is not the key. The thousands of Islamic organizations in the United States that are working against our system at every turn, legally, in the churches, working. Who do you think runs the interfaith outreach in the United States? Muslim Brotherhood. We could break that down. That's a whole nother program. Who's working with the state legislators? Turkish Muslim Brotherhood, inviting them overseas. Who works with the U.S. Congress members? Saudi Arabia, taking them on a 10-day junket. All propaganda. This is coming at them it's coming at us at every level, right? Under the Bush administration, towards the end of the Bush administration, in our Treasury Department, we now have Sharia-compliant finance in our banking system. So monies that are Sharia-compliant finance means they're compliant with Sharia, which means that some of that money necessarily per Sharia goes to fund terrorism. You just cannot paint a worse picture. Mr. Trump has undone a lot of the things that gave this movement some power because he's restoring our economy. He's doing a lot of things like that, but he is not going after the network here in the United States. He's not bulldozing their organizations, seizing their property, arresting their leaders. Well, and we could do all of this legally with current law.
Does he have authority? Does the government have
the evidence
authority?
Is there to do it.
It's basically criminal conspiracy law and RICO and all kinds of statutes, right?
Yep. Conspiracy to overthrow the government, conspiracy to commit murder, sedition, all of that.
Why do you think that's not happening? Why is the Trump administration not acting?
Because besides Mr. Trump, who I think his gut is generally right on the mark when it comes to these kind of national security issues, he's got almost nobody around him that understands this at that level to be able to actually create foreign policy. Everything we're doing, when you don't know this, any domestic terrorism strategy or foreign policy is going to be unsuccessful. You might get a few hits now and then, like, hey, we wiped out ISIS. That's good. I think killing thousands of jihadis is a good start. But the entire network here in the United States, leaving that intact And those are the entities advising your local police, school boards, your Congress, your state legislatures to the fact that Hamas Doing Business as CARE holds Muslim Day at state capitals around the country every year. And we allow that.
Well, so I think you made a really important point, and it has to do with, that ISIS isn't the problem, Boko Haram is not the problem, and so forth. All these terrorist organizations are not the problem. It seems to me like it's like one of these monsters where you cut the head off and it just kind of grows another one, right? Or maybe two even in its place, one of these hydras or one of the mythological creatures. And as long as we think that the latest manifestation of a violent organization is the problem, then we're never going to win the battle.
That's right.
Right? So we've got to understand the root of that violent ideology, don't we? And that seems to be...
We should make you an advisor to the president.
Seems to be where we're missing it.
You get it.
It strikes me. We've got a couple minutes left here, 2.5 minutes, and I want to also mention something, John. I think you have an email that you send out periodically from Understanding the Threat. Is that right?
We're trying. We've been sadly recently shut down, but we're trying to relaunch that. Constant Contact and MailChimp shut us down because the truth was too much for them to bear.
Wow.
Because people complained. And so we're now building our own platform. We're potentially going to use somebody who won't shut us down. But it's a battle. Here's what I would ask.
Okay.
For you listening, our biggest battle is getting out the message of who we are. When people hear this, I mentioned earlier, we briefed a dozen members of Congress. I briefed a dozen members of Congress at a breakfast a few weeks ago. When people hear this, they want to help. But we can't get the message out. We need your viewers, listeners, send people to understandingthethreat.com. Use the resources, share the resources, share the programs. Go to our capabilities page and look at what we're doing, because part of what we do is educate Christians about this. How do you actually minister to Muslims if you don't understand this?
Right, right. Well, I just want to tell our viewers that, John's materials are thoroughly documented. He quotes and cites to the Quran and to Muslim teachings thoroughly. He's not making this stuff up. I understand that there are different perspectives out there on this subject, but we all need to become educated, and so it's been really a privilege for us to be able to have you on tonight and help share that information. And here at Truth and Liberty, we're not endorsing or opposing any candidate for office. We're just trying to educate people on what's going on out there. And one of the biggest issues of our day is Islamic terrorism. So I really appreciate everyone who's watched us tonight and joined in on this. We also have a podcast, so I encourage you guys to check out our channel on iTunes. This and past episodes of the live cast are archived on truthandliberty.net. Get the word out, share it, and help people get better informed. Check out John's website. And so thanks again for watching us tonight. Next week, our guest is going to be Alex McFarland, and you won't want to miss that. So thanks again for joining us, everybody. God bless you, and have a good evening.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net.